Hello again, 122. In this video, we will continue with the political evolution of Europe since the end of World War II, and we'll discuss Great Britain since the end of the war. And in the next video, we will go over, leading into questions 2 and 3 about the breakup of Yugoslavia in the 1990s and Eastern Europe. And we will also then talk about the basic political and economic makeup of Europe today. And the end of World War II left Britain with massive economic problems. And the Labour Party overwhelmingly defeated Winston Churchill's Conservatives. Labour's promise of far-reaching social welfare measures was quite appealing in a country with a tremendous shortage of consumer goods and housing. And the new Labour government under Clement Attlee proceeded to turn Britain into a modern welfare state. And the process begins with the nationalization of the Bank of England, the coal and steel industries, public transportation and public utilities, such as electricity and gas. And in 1946, the new government established a comprehensive Social Security program and nationalized medical insurance. A Health Act established a system of socialized medicine that forced doctors and dentists to work with state hospitals. Although private practice could be maintained, the British welfare state became the model for most European nations. And continuing economic problems, however, brought the Conservatives back to power from 1951 through 1964. Churchill became prime minister again in the mid-50s, then Sir Anthony Eden and a couple of other people, but eventually Labour comes back because even though the Conservatives favor private enterprise, they accepted the welfare state, and by now the British economy had recovered from the war, but it was slow growth that reflected a long-term economic decline. And at the same time, Britain's ability to play the role of a world power had declined substantially. The empire has been ended. And in 1979, the Conservatives returned to power under Margaret Thatcher. And Mrs. Thatcher passed away, in 2013 of a stroke. And she became the first woman prime minister in British history. And there's the Iron Lady, and she's there talking with French Prime Minister at the time in 1986, Francois Mitterrand. And they had a congenial relationship, France and Britain, even though Thatcher is not a socialist. The Iron Lady, as she was called, broke the power of labor unions, but she was not able to eliminate the basic components of the welfare state, socialized medicine and some national control of utilities. And her economic policy termed Thatcherism improved the economic situation, but at a price. The south of England, for example, prospered, but the old industrial areas of the Midlands and the north declined because all those nationalized businesses, once they returned to the private sector, they went out of business because they couldn't compete against some of the newer areas in competition globally. And these areas in the North and Midlands were beset by high unemployment, poverty, and sporadic violence. Thatcher dominated British politics in the 1980s, but in 1990, Labour's fortunes revived when Thatcher's government attempted to replace local property taxes with a flat-rate tax payable by every adult. And critics argued that this was effectively a poll tax that would allow the rich to pay the same rate as the poor. And with the failure of this policy in 1990, Thatcher resigned. And later in new elections in 1997, John Major was the prime minister, another conservative. And the Conservatives ruled Britain for a generation, 17 years, until 1997, when Labour won a landslide victory. They were way overdue to come back. It's been a while. And the new Prime Minister, Tony Blair, was a moderate whose youthful energy instilled new vigor on the political scene. And Blair was one of the leaders in forming an international coalition against terrorism after the terrorist attack on the United States in 2001. 4 years later, however, his support of the U.S. war in Iraq, when a majority of Britons opposed it, caused his popularity to plummet. And in the summer of 2007, he stepped down and allowed the new Labour Party leader Gordon Brown to become prime minister. In 2010, in the wake of climbing unemployment and a global financial crisis, the Labour Party's 13-year rule ended when Conservative Party candidate David Cameron became prime minister on the basis of a coalition with Liberal Democrats. Cameron promised to reduce the government debt by cutting government waste in social services and overhauling the healthcare system. And that's where Britain is still at today, with the current Prime Minister Theresa May, who was elected in the midterm elections in 2016. And May's big proposal, ladies and gentlemen, is to take Britain out of the European Union in the next year. Brexit, as it's called, Brexit, is currently going to happen. Britain is going to leave the EU, and that's going to have repercussions for the future of that European organization. And this picture is from NBCnews.com from early in 2017. Next up will be Eastern Europe and the breakup of Yugoslavia, and what's the basic economic and political makeup of Europe today.